Hello and welcome to our webinar today, Creating Labs Quickly with Lab on Demand. We are going to be covering our lab authoring experience. And it is a very, very simple process to begin creating labs. I don't want to make it sound like you don't have any creative control over these labs, but we are going to be focusing on getting you up and running quickly and then taking that quickly generated lab and modifying it to do what you need. My name is Brian Bork. I am here with our readiness team at Learn on Demand Systems. We have people who are standing by to answer any questions that you might have, or at least record the questions so that we can talk about them at the end of the session. If you would like to type your question, you can do so in the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a pane for questions. You can just type your question right in there, and then we will address it as quickly as we possibly can. Like I said, we might wait until the end of the webinar to address your question, but make sure that you type your questions in there. No reason to wait until later. So let's dive right in, because quite honestly, there's not a lot of slides. There's a lot more demonstrations. So we want to get to it as quickly as possible. So Learn on Demand Systems has three primary features that make lab building quicker and easier than ever. We have what is known as our template gallery. Our template gallery has a selection of pre-created labs, which you can use as a base for your new lab. We have examples, or for example, we've got Ubuntu, we've got some CentOS, we've got some Kali Linux, we've got Windows 10, we have Windows Server, and then we've got ones that are already pre-created with Windows 10 and Windows Server, or Windows 10 and Kali, or Kali and Server. So there's all sorts of possibilities where you get your starting point. And even with Windows 10, there's variations of just a blank base VM with Windows 10 already configured. And then there's one that has a whole bunch of development tools already built in place. So our template gallery is already built out there, and we are adding things to it, and then you can add to it. You get your own personalized dashboard, and we'll take you through the dashboard as the first part because it's the first thing that comes up when you sign on, which gives you easy access to your active labs, any currently running or labs that you've recently run, as well as any favorite labs that you have marked. And we also have what we call the enhanced lab saving. It used to be that you use development tools to capture differencing disks. Now that's part of saving and committing changes, and we're going to show you how that process works. And it's much simpler and it's much more effective. So you can either save your instance, capture differencing disks, or capture start state if you have the permissions to do that. So like I said, there's not a lot of slides here. We just have a lot to demonstrate for you. So how about if we dive right in and take a look at the actual lab on demand developer interface in action. So here we are. I have just signed on, and this is the screen that I come to. This is what is known as our dashboard. And you can see here that it even says dashboard up above my my wonderful account here, which is called Brian Lab Dev. Now from here, I have the ability to create a lab profile, find lab profiles, or look at lab instances, which are labs that I have run recently, or instances of labs that I have run if I am a lab developer developing for other people's use. And then you can see here any active labs would show up here, any favorites or labs that are marked as a favorite, and I'll show you how we quickly and easily you can do that, would show up here, and then my recent lab instances here. Now, this does not include every lab instance, but it does include the most recent ones, and I believe it tracks up to 10 of those. So also, one thing that is important to note that all of these times and dates that you see here are based on US Central Standard Time. That's because that's where my user account is located. If your user account is located in, say, Pacific time zone, all your times would be shown in Pacific. So it just makes sure that you realize that even though mine is showing in Central, yours would not necessarily show in Central. So that's the dashboard. Quick, easy, and it's the first thing you see when you log in. So once again, we are trying to make things as efficient for you as lab developer. Now, we still have the capability for you to go into the admin screen and be able to do all of the things that you used to do or needed to do in the previous incarnations. But because we have the dashboard here, we can get started quickly and easily. Now, I want you to imagine that you've never created a lab before. For some of you, that may not be a stretch. Maybe you're just checking us out for the first time. But for those of you who made a lab before, you know about the process of creating a lab series and then creating a lab profile, and then maybe adding virtual machine profiles and so on and so forth. That process has changed dramatically. When you click on Create Lab Profile now, in the upper left, you get taken immediately to what is known as the template gallery. Now, I don't want to say our template gallery, but it is a combination of your and our template gallery. So the collective our, if you will. This is a listing of all of the lab profiles that we have built as templates for you. And you can create your own templates and use those templates as well. So you can take a lab and make it into a template. So when you, and again, this is when you go from the dashboard on Create Lab Profile, or if you go to Admin and Create Lab Profile there, it does the exact same thing. All right. So the choices here are plentiful. You know, we've got Windows 10 base and we've got Windows 10 with DevTools. We also have these on two different platforms. Platforms don't really matter quite as much unless you have a specific need for something that has to run in vSphere or something that has to run in Hyper-V. Right now it's being shown on what is the most popular, but you can change that to what's new, and we can change it to do it by name as well. So we're going to use popularity. By the way, we also have filtering over on the left-hand side. That shows up by default. If you want to get more screen real estate of what's showing in the template gallery, you can just click on the filters tab and it takes the filters away and you get plenty of room there. But with the filters on, you can also say, I want to see something for just Windows 10, for instance, and then you can see all of the different ones that are listed here, okay? So the filtering is nice and it's very handy. You can check them on, you can check items on the filters either on or off. So we're going to use a base VM, I'm sorry, a DevTools VM here. And this is a Windows 10 virtual machine with tools for software development, such as Visual Studio. And that's got Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, as well as SQL Server Management Studio and a whole slew of other things. And I'll show you what those things are in just a moment. Now, if you wanted to, you could preview this. And the preview is just like launching the lab, which is essentially what preview does. It launches a lab so you can see everything that's in it and determine if it is right for what you need. I know for a fact that this is the one I need, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Create. Here, I'm going to go ahead and put in template 00, and this will be demo lab for template gallery lab profile. All right. Now, I could go in and put in a description, or I should actually go ahead and put in a description, but rather than sit here and watch me type, I'm going to just move forward. You can change between your development organization and your production organization quickly and easily by choosing the organizations. And here is what I think is one of the handiest features. We have taken creating a lab profile down from dozens of clicks down to just a few clicks. I can choose a lab profile or a lab series to associate this lab profile with, or I can create one from scratch. Because I already have one out here, I'm just going to go ahead and choose, but I could just click on create and put the lab series name in there. But I'm going to click on choose. I'll do a search here, and here is my lab author lab series that I'm going to use. And I can set my expected duration and my maximum duration. For those of you who don't know about our durations, there are two different durations. The expected duration is how long it would take a user to go from the beginning of the lab all the way through the lab if they were sitting down and doing nothing but the lab. So for example, if my lab beginning to end would take 1 hour, I would leave my expected duration set to 60 minutes. If it were 2 hours, I would set it to 120 minutes. But that's not the real world, right? A lot of users are going to save and then resume their lab, or they're going to be in the middle of the lab and then there's going to be a little bit of lecture or something like that. So expected duration also has a counterpart, which is maximum duration. The maximum duration is the timer that actually appears in the lab, and it's how many minutes they have to do the lab. Now, of course, we can also, multiply any number of hours by 60 and get the number of minutes that we need. But the key here is that your maximum duration can never exceed 2 times your expected duration. Because once again, your expected duration is how long it should take an average user to get all the way through your lab. Taking out the whole equation of doing a lab at the end of the day, saving, and then coming back on the next day, the morning of the next day, and resuming, that is a separate equation. But the actual amount of time is what you should put in your expected duration. I'm going to leave both of mine set to 60, but you could change those as needed. And then I go ahead and click on OK. Now this is all it took to build a working functional lab. Well, almost. We have to also click on the launch button and get it up and running. But now I want to be clear, we are not working with the lab that we based this off of. We're not working with the template. We're working on our own lab profile that's now for us to be able to use. So I'm going to go ahead and click on launch, and you'll see that this first time it's going to say, hey, this will be ready in about 20 seconds. And you're thinking to yourself, wow, that's going to be really a quick launch. Well, remember, this is the first time this lab has ever been launched, and it is assuming that it will take 20 seconds, but it's not actually going to take 20 seconds. It's actually going to take anywhere from 1.5 minutes to up to 2.5 minutes in order to be able to launch. So you'll see that this is going to take a little bit of time to launch. But what I want to show you is that now this lab profile is my lab profile. I can go in and change things around if I want to. If I want to change boot order, if I want to change the amount of RAM or something like that, I've got all of those capabilities to be able to go in and edit my lab profile, to edit the VM profile, to add removable media, everything that I need to be able to do. I should also note that I am working inside of Chrome, and of course this interface works just like it works the same regardless of whether you're working in Firefox, Chrome, Edge, Chromium, whatever web browser you're choosing to use. So we're just going to give this a second to actually come up and boot up. I do have the option of showing while I'm starting, but I want you to see the actual boot time here, and it will not be any longer than 2.5 minutes, I hope, unless I've done something wrong. But as you can see, it's very quick, it's very easy, and it's pretty painless. All right, so here it is. My lab profile is up and running. Let me minimize this in the background here so that you can just see the lab. you notice that not only do I have the virtual machine, and that virtual machine is pre-configured with things like SQL Server Management Studio, Visual Studio Community, Visual Studio Code, GitHub, I think is on here. Yep, there's GitHub Desktop. So I've got all of these different capabilities ready for me. So I don't have to install any of that software. Well, I don't have to install it, but maybe I do have to configure it, or maybe I have to do other things with my lab, like maybe I need to have something on the desktop or something like that. So you can configure this exactly like you want to configure this. You can move things around on the desktop. You can put more icons on the desktop. All of these different things, all of these different capabilities we have. But the nice thing about this, this template system is that just because it's set up this way doesn't mean that you can't add things to it. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put a folder on the desktop here. Here we go, a new folder on the desktop, and we'll call this lab files. And then inside of here, we're going to put a new text document, and we'll call that "Isn't This Easy?" All right. And there we go, we've got that. Now I could do things like install software. I could remove software that I need. I have, sort of many different options available to me that allow me to be able to go in and do what I need to do to configure this for what I need. Now, if we were doing this with a multiple VM set, maybe Windows 10 and say Server 2019, I would be able to do that, and I would be able to switch between those virtual machines. I could build a domain relationship if I needed to. I could do all of the things that I need to be able to do. And then when I've got it the way I want it, I can go in and, I was going to also edit my instructions. The instructions that are here are pre-configured to show you some of the options you have available. Those are more for your use. There wouldn't be the version that you need for actually being able to go in and you wouldn't want to give this out to your end users. So let's go ahead and we'll just select all of these and get rid of them. And we'll put in, welcome to your lab. There you go. Oh, and we'll make it a heading. This is standard markdown for those of you who haven't worked with, oops, I didn't do that right. There we go. So now it's standard markdown. I'm using the formatting options that are there as well. All right, so I've got my lab all configured the way I wanted. Of course, I could edit my instructions independently of my VM. I didn't have to edit them now, but I'll do them all at once. So now I can click on save. Now we have more options here as lab developers than what the end users have. The end users only have the ability to save their lab instance and return to it later. And they'll actually get a message that says, we'll save for 2 days. It will expire at this time on this date. But they won't have these other two options. These other two options are the ones that are available for you as lab developers to be able to create a updated image of what you are currently using, or create a brand new lab profile. So if you've got, maybe you're teaching a class that it talks about chapter 1 or module 1 is all about installing software, and then you want to take that and you want to make it into a module 2 after the software is installed, and then it's going to be all about configuring that software. Well, you could make a new lab profile right from here. But in this case, we're just going to update the current lab profile. So I'm going to click on next. And I don't have to put in a note here, but I always should put in a note. So I'll put in updated desktop with folder and file. And I'm even going to copy that, and then I can paste it later. Please note that I could change my RAM and my processors right here so that I am updating this lab profile with those changes. So if I decide that I really don't need 4 processors, I only need 2. Or if I decide I need 8 gig of RAM instead of 4 gig of RAM, I can make those changes to my DM profile right here. Now, it's important to note that if I make these changes, they will only be valid on the next launch. They're not changing it for this launch, it's for the next launch. And then, of course, I want to save my disk changes because that is what actually did it. So I'm going to put my node in here, updated the desktop with folder and file. When you update your disks, you have to put in a note. So it's not an option like it is when you update the lab profile. When you update your disk changes, you always have to put a note in with what you did. And then you put in your storage location. My storage location is under the wonderful Brian B. Associates. And then I go ahead and click on OK. Now, if you have ever used the Capture Diff Disk tool with the developer tool, you will know that sometimes capturing difference in disk, or as we're now calling it, committing changes, is a long process. It can sometimes take longer than you think it would for the amount of effort that it is doing. In this particular case, we are saving changes to not only our hot storage where it starts off, but it's also going to cold storage and making sure that it's more easily distributed. However, this process can take a little bit of time. So rather than sit here and watch this, I'll leave this one running. And I want to go back and I want to show you just a couple more things inside of the Lab on Demand interface. So first of all, if I were, let's say that I have completed that that capture and it was all done, which will be done in in just a few minutes, but like I said, let's not sit here and watch that. So I have created a template 01, which has the demo lab profile for webinar on it, which I did the exact same things to it, and then I made sure that the commit changes were complete. First of all, I want to show you how easy it is to make a lab profile a favorite. You can simply click on the little favorite link up on the lab profile. And then once you do that, once you go to your dashboards, you'll notice that the favorite appears and it's there. Now, if you don't want it to be a favorite anymore, you can also remove it. And then when you go back to it, you'll see that it has been unchecked or unhighlighted. Also, once I have completed a lab, I can make that lab a template for other people with my organization to be able to use by editing the lab profile, going to the Advanced tab, and then scrolling down to, whoops, trying to highlight just this line, Publish to Organization Template. So I'm going to go ahead and check that box, and then I'm going to save this lab profile. And now, when I go to my dashboard, you will see that when I create a lab profile, if I click on my organizations, I have, well, this one used to, that one used to be one of them, but this is the brand new demo lab profile for webinar. So now somebody could create based on what I have created. All right, let's go back and launch this, and I'll show you that the launch has the exact same changes that I've made. My welcome to your lab is there in the instructions. My lab files with isn't this easy is here. And if I had done, changed the background, or if I had installed software or whatever, all of those changes would also show. All right. So that takes us through how quick and easy it is. And again, we have been talking for maybe 20 minutes, or we've been demoing for maybe 20 minutes. And in that time, we have created a lab profile, we have modified that lab profile, we've saved it, and we've made it available as a template for other people within our organization. So let me go ahead and end this and switch back to my slideshow. Here we go. All right. So just a couple of extra resources for you. You can learn more about the overall developer experience, including an overview, information on the author dashboard, template gallery, and enhanced lab saving. You can check this out at LODS dot or period ONE, we call it LODS.1 / simplified lab experience, all one word. The lab experience is simplified. The name isn't quite as simplified as it could be. We have another webinar coming up next Thursday, which is keeping tabs on the talent, managing instructors in the TMS. You can sign up for those at LODS.1 / feature demos, all one word. And we've got a lab developer workshop coming up on Thursday, January 28th. Test your code writer's skills with Code Labs. It's a free 3-hour workshop for lab developers. It's hands-on, and you can sign up for that at LODS.1 / workshop.